Hello and welcome to my reflective video regarding my dinosaur. I began the project by deciding which dinosaur I'd like to create. I chose the T-Rex as I don't know much about dinosaurs and felt it would have lots of helpful reference, as it's arguably the most well-known dinosaur. Rather than creating an organic dinosaur, I opted for a mech dinosaur as I wanted to try and improve my hard surface modelling techniques and emerge with a more unique final outcome. I began researching mechs and robots and stored anything I felt I could incorporate into my design. I looked at things such as Iron Man, Terminator and Transformers, stuff like that, to get an idea of what I'd like to do. I also looked at different type of robotic animals, as this would help sort of get an idea of how to do the mechanical joints on a robotic animal. I looked at a variety of different mechs to get inspiration from multiple sources for my design. I looked through a lot of the assets created for Arron, which then influenced the direction of my project in a big way. Once I'd gathered some ideas for the project, I then made a basic concept design which acted as a good starting point for modelling from. When creating the high poly model, I tried to plan ahead to save myself some time. I tried to create everything that needed to be as a separate element, so it would be easy when it came to skinning. I tried to make sure that I kept smooth edges so that all of the details would show up in my bake. As T-Rex arms are fairly short in proportion to the rest of their body, I decided to design a more useful arm with more human-like fingers and more proportionate to the rest of its body. Although I wanted to keep the head quite smooth and rounded and futuristic looking, I decided that the top of the head needed to be sharp and jagged to keep the aggressive look of the T-Rex. When it came to the low poly modelling, it was fairly easy, as all I had to do was take my high poly elements, delete the turbo smooth modifiers, then remove any loops that weren't adding to the silhouette. When it came to texturing, I used a tutorial I found on Marmoset's website, which helps you when setting up materials. One I found especially helpful was the chrome material. The tutorial shows that it's best to use a darker colour in your diffuse and then a lighter colour in your specular. I used this technique in the rusted chrome areas of my dinosaur, as you can see highlighted here. One of the problems that I did come across was when I baked out my normal map from 3ds Max. Found that around some of the elements there were white lines around the edges, and on some occasions it created seams when applied to my model, but for the most part they were just outside the UV ranges. Though some of the ones that created seams I had to get rid of using the spot healing and clone stamp tools. As for rigging, I used a basic cat rig. It was fairly easy to set up, as most of the elements are rigid. The only elements that aren't rigid are on the tail and on the neck. During animation, if you look at the head, it's easy to notice that the lower jaw goes through the head as it closes. This is because the lower jaw was too wide to fit inside of the head. This should have been tested earlier on when modelling the low poly. If I was to do the project again, I would have spent more time making a second idle animation, as this one is fairly obvious that it is on loop due to the roar at the beginning. The second idle would be a lot calmer and just contain calm robotic movements. So in UDK I've managed to set up a basic animation blend, which blends between my idle animation and my walk cycle. Thanks to Greg for some last minute feedback. I've now put some for reflections onto my material, so that the metal shines up a bit more and looks a lot more like metal than it did before, and also the chrome looks a lot shinier, so it makes the model look generally more realistic and believable as a metal. I added the reflections using a sky texture that's already inside of UDK, and just sort of overlaid it over the top of my map material. I did post my work up on Polycount to try and get some constructive criticism from industry professionals, but I didn't manage to get any replies. I did start a thread straight after I'd finished my high poly as well, but I didn't get any replies on that either. I think the best idea would have been to start a thread right at the beginning of the project and keep it updated the whole way through to keep people's interest. In comparison to industry standard work from games such as Hawken, I think there's still a lot to be learnt and a lot to improve on. I think one of the main areas is the texture maps could be improved on massively, and I feel that I could have gone for something a bit more complex. As you can see with the Hawken mechs, there's a lot more going on, and a lot more equipment involved with what they have as far as attachments on the models. I think if I'd had more tri-count left to work with, I would have been able to put a flamethrower or some guns or some sort of weaponry on my model to have a bit more about it, which would have improved it further. I think one of the main things that could have improved the texture maps was just putting a bit more thought into where the damage and dirt and grime is going to be, and that's about it. Thanks for your time, and thank you for listening.